And welcome back. We are going to do a little different lesson today. We're going to do a programming with examples so we can get some hands-on implementation of various different programming. So in this lesson, I want to go ahead and show the different things related to variables and how they are going to impact our code moving forward. So to get started, let's go ahead and first start off by creating some int variables. And so if you remember when we created ints, those are going to represent positive or negative whole numbers. So let's just go ahead and create an int, which is our type, and then we need some names. So let's just go ahead and call this, for example, rate1, and we can of course set that to a value if we want. So let's just say that is 15, and of course end with our semicolon. Now this of course sets up a single variable, but what's if we wanted to test other variables? Now I mentioned in our last lesson the issue with having variables that aren't valid. So let's go ahead and just put some other names here. So let's just say like first place. Let's go ahead and say something like long. And let's go ahead and say something like number of zeros. All right. So if I say this, you can see we have a few errors in here. Number of zeros didn't give me any errors, but first place is. And if you look at this right here, we get this red squiggle that tells us it's a syntax error. It says syntax error on token 1. That's because, again, remember, variables can't start with a number. So how could I fix this variable here if I wanted to keep it? Well, instead of using the digit 1, I could write that out. So for example, I might make this first place with the word first. And you notice now it has no problem with that. Now what about this one? What about the word long here? Well, if we remember, long is a keyword. It is a reserved word that is used in Java. So if we go ahead and change this like to long number, now we no longer have that error. Now here I created a number of zeros, and you notice we're following camel casing. But what's if I went ahead and created another one called number of zeros, but I created it like this? You'll notice that we do not have an error here. All right, Java says these are two different variables, even though this variable and this variable are technically the same naming. Because this one starts with a capital N and this one starts with a lowercase n, Java treats them differently. All right, let's go ahead and just do a couple more variable declarations here. Let's say we wanted to do a measurement. Let's say we're using the American Imperial System, and we're going to say we're using feet and inches. So I can say feet and inches, right? Awesome. But if we follow variable conventions, we say we probably want to initialize this something, because maybe we're using this to get the measurement from a user. Well, we might say, well, we could wait to get that measurement, or you can go ahead and say, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and initialize this to 0. And again, initializing is a great way to give the initial value here, because maybe I want to go ahead and print that out. So if I want to print out a variable, it's just system.out.println, and then I would just put in the variable name. So this would give me feet, and if I do another one, this would give me inches. And so now if I were to run this program, we of course should expect that it should say 0 and 0, and that is exactly what we have. Awesome. Let's do a little bit more variable practice here. We've done some good work here now with integers. Well, let's say I want to use some doubles. So I'm just going to go create another int. Let's just call this one count, and we can have a double, and we're going to call this one, let's say distance. And I'm going to set that one equal to a value, so let's do 1.5. And that looks great. Let's just get our println statements up and going. So system.out.println. Let's do one for count, and system.out.println, and set that one for distance. All right. Now, we of course saw this before. Can you figure out what is the error here? What is the thing that I need to fix about count in order for this error to go away? All right, you might have seen it. You might even guess it. If I hover over this mouse real quick, it will tell me that it has not been initialized. Oh, I can initialize this variable. In fact, you'll see Eclipse has suggested to me, hey, here's a good value to initialize it. Now I can go ahead and type in here, or I can double click this prompt, and you'll see it will give me an initial value. So now count is set to 0, and this print line is happy. All right, a few more here. Let's just go ahead and add in now. Let's do a char this time. And I'm just going to char letter, and I'm going to have equal to a single quote A. And let's do a comma and call letter 2. And I'm going to set that equal to a single quote B. And then let's go ahead and do a reassignment here. So let's just say that letter is now equal to a single quote of capital A. And if I were to do a system.out.println, let's just go ahead and print out letter. Save that. Give it a run. You can see it prints out a capital A. Now, what about a bool? All right, because we know like longs are just fancy integers. Same thing with floats being, a different version of a double. But what does a boolean actually look like? So if we create ourselves a boolean, and let's just call this is positive. All right. And you'll notice if I do that, it doesn't necessarily give me an error, right? Because again, we've just declared it. But what happens if we try to do this? Because remember, this is a true or false value, so we should expect something similar to happen along those lines. So is positive. All right, and we get the same error as we saw before. We didn't initialize this. So let's set this equal to false. All right, because remember, it's a true or false value. So we're going to say it's going to be false. If I run my code, you'll see it literally outputs the word false. Now, it doesn't mean that it's the word false, it's the value false. And that's a big thing to keep in mind here. We'll see a little bit more of that when we get later on dealing with conditional and branching statements. But for now, you just need to know that this value just means this is false. Now, one last thing that I just want to make sure we reiterate is if I have a value and I want to output it, remember, each of these variables that I'm outputting up here have been just the name of the variable. So let's just say I want to come back and print out rate 1. If I put rate 1 in quotations, what is going to happen here with this code? Well, if I go ahead and run this, you see it literally spits out the word rate 1. So if I wanted to print what that is, then I need to remove these quotes, save it, and run it, and you'll see it now prints out 15. So this, again, are great ways for us to go ahead and use some. Hopefully this examples with all these different types of variables has been helpful for you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.